Just briefly, is even worse. It's even more landlocked, and the same tactics will apply there. Look where Afghanistan is, right? In the middle of Asia, on the other side of the world. It's a logistical nightmare. And the Taliban offensive is now expected. Therefore, my thesis is the attack on Iran translates into the end of the world as we have known it. And you've just got to think about what that means to you. Your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations for your children, your notions of your own future, all of this can disappear in the moment that Iran comes under attack. Now, the neocon fascist madmen, the faction that we're dealing with, these are the heirs of Hitler. I heard that there was some question about Holocaust denial in connection with this conference. Holocaust denial, to me, is pure historical idiocy. It is an absurdity from a historical point of view to deny the obvious facts of genocide against Jews and other populations in Central Europe under the Nazi regime. It's not correct to say that nobody here has written about the Holocaust. I have, in this book, 1992. And what's my finding? And this is the important part. How did he get in there? I guess I was going to try to show you that the neocons are really bad, right? That, you know, where did these guys come from? Here's one of them. Here's another one. This tension is becoming too great. All right, here we are, back to it now. The point is, they are the Nazis. The Bush family are the Nazis. We have nothing to do with that. Here's the German magnate Thyssen, okay, financier. Here's his book, I Paid Hitler. He did, it's all true. How did he pay Hitler? What bank did he use? Prescott Bush. Here's Thyssen back there, and his friend Hitler, and a bunch of Nazi bigwigs. This is the same faction that we're dealing with today. And here we see, this is the old New York Herald Tribune, July 1941. You read here in the fine print, Thyssen has an account at the Union Banking Corporation. See it? Union Banking Corporation. On the board, Prescott. Here's an overview. Thyssen, the Nazi, Hitler and the Nazi Party, Prescott Bush, Bush 41, Bush 43. There are other Nazis in here participating in the infrastructure, the management of the concentration camps, being part of the Nazi military-industrial complex, and otherwise promoting the rise to power of Hitler, perhaps arming Hitler, all of this, Prescott Bush. So we reject all of this. We spit it out. And here's the cover-up written by a sports writer who had written on Mickey Mantle before that. But this is basically Bush the Elder commissioned this book to answer my book. Basically, the thesis of this is, my daddy was not a Nazi. Well, I'm sorry, he was. He was. I also have to tell you, I'm close to the German wing of the movement. They founded Das Netzwerk in Berlin, August 2007. This was on this trip that I hurt my leg, so I have the experience of this, and they are appalled. No, right now, sorry, 2006. They were appalled by the prevalence of Holocaust denial in the U.S. And they said, look, I lived across from the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. How can you deny these obvious facts? And Dachau, near Munich, we went by there several times, or my family told me. It's simply an absurdity, and it's historically wrong, and of course it's politically outrageous. And this is what I would say. It's a crime. It's a crime. In some places it's a crime you can go to jail. This I'm not in favor of. But it's worse than a crime. It's a mistake. It's an error. And I hope we have nothing to do with this, because I certainly can't be associated with it. Now, back to the line. Since 2005, we've been living under the Cheney Doctrine. And the Cheney Doctrine says, new 9/11 with weapons of mass destruction as the pretext for attacking Iran. Now, this has been mentioned once or twice. But this is one of the most important revelations that we've had. From the point of view of this movement, this gives us a weapon that we've never had. And we've got to use this, grab a hold of this speech with both hands and your teeth, and hold on to it and use it to beat the ruling class over the head, and journalists and everybody else. This is our dear friend Zbigniew Brzezinski. He warns essentially of a new 9/11, February 1st, 2007. This is his testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, this is no angel. He knows about provocations. He started the war in Afghanistan. He sent the U.S. teams into Afghanistan to get the Soviets to invade. So he knows how to provoke and start a war. He's done it. His difference of opinion is this. He is a petty Polish aristocrat. His ruling passion, he hates Russia. He doesn't care about Iran. He says Iran is nothing. He says, leave that to the neocons, right? He has a great contempt of the neocons. They're obsessed with Israel. He's not. He has a great contempt for Miss Rice. He sees Miss Rice as a fool. Of course, she is. His line is, don't waste your time mucking around in Iran because you're going to get a real bad bloody nose. He says basically, put me in there, we'll go straight to Moscow. So that's the framework in which you've got to understand it. But nevertheless, having said all that, we got to thank him because he's done an important service. Here's what he says. If the United States continues to be bogged down in a protracted, bloody involvement in Iraq, the final destination on this downhill track is likely to be a head-on conflict with Iran and with much of the world of Islam at large. The emphasis, the underlining is his in the original text. A plausible scenario, this is how he thinks, a plausible scenario for a military collision with Iran involves Iraqi failure to meet the benchmarks, the targets, right, the goals, followed by accusations of Iranian responsibility for the failure. Well, that is where we are right now. The Iranians send shaped charges, the Iranians don't help, the Iranians are bad, and all the rest of this. And then, by some provocation in Iraq or a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. This is big. This is a tremendous opportunity. It culminates in a defensive U.S. action against Iran that plunges a lonely America into a spreading and deepening quagmire, eventually ranging across Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. An immense area with hundreds of millions of people now. A huge part of the world. A logistical nightmare, an impossibility, national suicide, guaranteed fascism, rivers of blood. We have got to stop this. Other people don't seem to understand. They seem to live in a dream. We must act. There are all of these victims over there who would like to stop this. They can't. You can, I think, and since you can, you must. Now let's take a look. A plausible scenario for a military collision with Iran involves a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. Now this admits everything that we've been fighting for.
Is this still Brzezinski?
Brzezinski. This is Brzezinski. I've just left out the middle part of the sentence to sort of give you a context of it. He's saying that a false flag, synthetic terror, state-sponsored provocation is being readied by the Cheney faction. That's the only way to read this. Now, he has been asked by journalists, hey, Zbigniew, what did you mean by that? And then he's evasive. He's evasive. He doesn't want to say, well, they're getting ready for a terror provocation. But we know the USS Maine, the Gulf of Tonkin, all the rest of this stuff. This is now topic A. We have got to blow this out of all proportion. Well, we can't blow it out of all proportion. This is now the central theme of agitation for the coming weeks and months. Your congressman, look, if you had a serious Congress, they'd say, emergency hearings right away. There's a threat of a new provocation leading to a general war. And this is not just anybody. This is the former director of the National Security Council under Carter. He's one of the elders of the Democratic Party in terms of foreign policy, unfortunately. He is. So this eminent person, this well-known top government official in the past, says that a terror attack is being prepared. Now again, this is everything that we have tried to say, that that's what 9/11 was. He's saying a new 9/11. And most likely, because of what we know about Cheney, it's a new 9/11 with weapons of mass destruction. You have got to write to your congressmen, write to your senators. You've got to call into radio talk shows. You've got to raise bloody hell on this issue. We can't let this go by. This is the biggest thing that has come along. He has revealed the inner workings of what goes on. And this time we know it in advance. Now, obviously, our goal ought to be to so inoculate and prepare the American people that when this happens, they will not be stampeded into hysteria. They will not be manipulated into Pavlovian salivation for war. That's a tall order. But the more we publicize this, the more we drive a wedge into this and open it up, make him say more. One obvious thing would be congressional hearings. He's invited to come. He doesn't want to come. They subpoena him. Subpoena, come and tell us what this is. And not next week, but tomorrow and today. It's an emergency question to get to the bottom of this. So again, please mark this well. This is absolutely fundamental because it's, again, it's the essence of everything we've been trying to teach people. I never thought, in my view, it was never about a past event. It was always to try to show the technique and how it might be repeated and how you could try to fight against the repetition. So, we must mobilize hell for leather on this Brzezinski warning. One obvious one, take back the airwaves. Call in. There's a tremendous authority. He said, well, Senator, what do you say to the fact that Zbigniew Brzezinski has warned that a new 9/11 is being prepared right now as a way to get to war with Iran? And you can do a lot. Remember July, August, when we were trying to build the audience for the Alex Jones show, the C-SPAN panel? We had a tremendous effect. We broke into Limbaugh, to Hannity, to the whole fascist parrot universe of the radio. Now, we not only have one warning, we have two. If the president of Russia says that we're in a situation more dangerous than the Cold War, then we are in a situation more dangerous with the Cold War. This is the Munich speech of Putin, February 11th. Here he is, he's arriving in Munich. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Putin. I know a lot of people don't like foreigners. What is he, one of them foreigners? Yes, he's one of them foreigners. The Ruskies. What are the Ruskies up to now? Some people think he's the Antichrist. Some people think he's satanic. I don't know what to tell you. This is a public service of the first rank. He has put us on notice that we are in a pre-war period. This is Munich, right? This is it's called the Wehrkundegesellschaft. I met the founder of it some years ago, a guy called von Kleist. So here he is giving his speech. It was the 11th of February, Saturday. We are observing unrestrained, hypertrophied use of force. It's grown out of all proportion. A force that plunges the world into an abyss of recurring conflicts. One state, the United States, has overstepped its national borders in every way. He is essentially saying the great truths of our time that no head of state of any importance has been able to say in this form. It is a philippic. It is a declaration of all the main things that have to be said. What does it mean to have a unipolar world? One center of power, one center of force, a single center of decision-making. This is the world of one master, one sovereign. Everything that's going on in the world today is a consequence of attempts to implement a unipolar world concept. What's the result? Unilateral, illegitimate actions that don't resolve a single problem On the contrary, they cause new human tragedies and more tension. It's true. American military actions bring us to the abyss of one conflict after another. Political solutions are becoming impossible. Well, if political solutions become impossible, what's left? Only war and international affairs. In other words, international anarchy. Now, one of his advisors is General Ivashov, my friend from Brussels here in November of 2005. And in other words, this is a whole stratum of the Russian government that shares these views. And here's an important fact. We do not benefit from the unipolar world. The dominance is ruinous, not only for those inside the system, but also for the sovereign himself, for the US, because it destroys him from within, and it has nothing in common with democracy. Putin. The result is also an arms race with the desire of all kinds of countries, small countries, to get nuclear weapons to defend themselves. This is Iran. The Washington Post summed it up, February 10th. Putin blasted the US for unilateral militaristic actions that made the world a more dangerous place than during the Cold War. Think of what that means. Worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962. And at this point I had to say, you know, he's right. The fact that he says it, the fact that the president of Russia says so means that it's true. So at this point, my DEFCON went from worst situation since the Cuban Missile Crisis to the worst situation I have ever seen in my life. Now, the war avoidance, however, extends to Bush. He says, Bush is my friend. He's a decent man. You can do business with him. Now, why does he say that? Because he thinks that the Democratic Party would attack Russia sooner. He sees Bush as losing himself in Iran and the Middle East. But if you had Brzezinski and Holbrooke and the rest of them running the State Department, the thrust would be directly against Moscow. So he's always got a kind word. And some people have said, oh, Putin, he's no good. He supports Bush. He supports Bush because he thinks the Democrats would bring war sooner than Bush is doing. And of course, this very ominous phrase, our responses will be asymmetric but highly effective. You don't want to find out what that means. I once talked to, I've talked to any number of officers of the former Wehrmacht, and they said, boy, when that Soviet offensive gets going, no eye remains dry. In other words, everybody weeps when the Red Army gets going, and there's no way around it. Now, this is an attempted gesture of friendship. It's the greatest one since de Gaulle's speech in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in 1965. De Gaulle in 1965 said, don't go to Vietnam, don't. Think of all the people that have been dead for all these decades that would have been alive if somebody had listened to de Gaulle. Now we have another chance. We can listen to Putin. He's not interested in conflict. Then they said to him, how come you sold those missiles, those surface-to-air missiles, air defense missiles to Iran? He said, I did it because I didn't want them to think that they were driven into a corner. Interesting. And here is the olive branch. He quotes Franklin D. Roosevelt in his speech, when peace has been broken anywhere, the peace of all countries everywhere is in danger. This is Roosevelt in the fall of 1939. This is the olive branch. What he's saying is, with a normal progressive U.S. government, we'd be fine. It's the neocon fascist madmen that are driving the world into World War III. And of course, we've just had the 125th anniversary of Roosevelt's birth. And of course, in this country, he's absolutely without honor, nothing for the 125th. In Moscow, they had a big celebration for Roosevelt and the anti-Hitler alliance. So Roosevelt, and people should realize in this country what the world has generally revealed, that this is the best presidency of the 20th century in every way. Now, over here we have the neocon fascist madmen, right? We have the mentally imbalanced McCain, we have the warmonger Lieberman, we've got Gates, We're going to get to him, the founder of Al-Qaeda, and we've got the unfortunate Mrs. Merkel of Germany. And naturally, they were scowling, they didn't like Putin's speech. But again, this is it's an extremely important moment. The Munich conference, then and now, the Munich conference of September 1938 was the immediate prelude to World War II, right? That was Hitler, Mussolini, Chamberlain, and Daladier carving Czechoslovakia. Remember that one? Now this is Munich 2007. Putin's attempt at the 11th hour, in extremis, to ward off World War III. It is an attempted exercise in war avoidance, and we must understand this. It defines the world that we live in. And of course, the US side is under the influence of the neocon fascist madmen, and that's Dr. Strangelove. He's the founder of the neocons. He's the patron saint of the neocons. The US military forces are going to find themselves in the same situation as our man Slim Pickens, right? Trying to ride the tiger of a hydrogen bomb. And now we must contemplate this. This is now before us, in a certain sense, in a way that it has not been since the 1980s, I suppose. Since about 1985, I would judge, there has not been this danger. But now there is again. And we of the 9/11 Truth Movement, I submit, have to understand this. I have a mushroom cloud on my book, and people have said, why? Why that on a 9/11 book? I don't have buildings coming down. I have the thermonuclear mushroom cloud. And the reason for that is that the danger of a general thermonuclear war is an integral part of 9/11. As soon as you have 9/11, the world moves towards something, a denouement of this horrendous type. Now, not everything is bleak. We've got things like this. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization. In other words, there are some people in the world who are fighting back. They're resisting in their own way. It is definitely a pole of resistance against US and British imperialism. And these are the prime ministers. You can see who's in it, right? The main thing is that Russia and China are in it. And then these other guys are the former Soviet republics of Central Asia, except for Turkmenistan. That's the founding in 03. And now here's the one in 06. So you have China, you have Iran, you have Pakistan with Musharraf, you have even Karzai, the US puppet from Afghanistan, is there. So this now begins to represent a very significant portion of humanity. And I think if India comes in as an observer, it becomes an organization of several billion people and tremendously important strategically. And actually, the US media never mentioned the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We also have, and I hope that Peter Phillips is here, but I guess he's not. Oh, are you? Wonderful. This is my invitation to the sociologists to look into this, because this is, I think, absolutely critical. There is a split, I see, in the US ruling class, precisely because of the gravity of the moment. And it is the Baker group, the James Baker III group of moderate imperialists, and the extreme Schultz neocon imperialists. Now here's Baker. He essentially says, we've got to recognize the fact that Iraq has been a defeat, and what we've got to do is use proxies. The model of how Baker wants to proceed is, look at Somalia. We want to destroy Somalia. How do we do it? Well, the neocon says, bomb them. And Baker says, no, don't bomb them yourself. I mean, you can bomb them a little bit, but get Ethiopia to do it for you. Ethiopia destroys Somalia, everything's hunky-dory. Concerning Iran, he has said, he says, I'll get you Syria. He says, I delivered Syria in the first Gulf War. I'll get you Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt fighting against Iran and Hezbollah and the Iraqi Shiites. And we'll dominate the Middle East that way, with minimal losses. Now the Schultz group, these are the neocons. This is Bush, Cheney, Wolfowitz, the Vulcans, the lunatics, Karl Rove, Rupert Murdoch, important. Their line is, no, 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 U.S., Britain, Israel, at war with the world forever. We kill everybody. And the other group, of course, says, hey, wait a minute, you're too weak. You can't do that. You've got to use dupes. You got to use proxies. You got to use stooges. Oh, no, because then we'd have to give concessions. Now, this is unprecedented. Just a very brief historical excursus. In the 20th century, there's generally been, during the time of the invisible government, there's generally been an undisputed spokesperson for the ruling class. It's not a dictator, it's just the designated speaker, okay? Andrew Mellon was Secretary of the Treasury, got it spelled wrong, but you see, all during the 1920s. The word on him is Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover served under Mellon. That's it, they did. So he was the spokesman then. Then we have Colonel Stimson. He was in the cabinet under Taft. He was in the cabinet under Hoover, and he ran the Pentagon in World War II and stocked it full of his proteges. The ego ideal of Bush the Elder. He spoke at Bush the Elder's graduation from Andover. He was the spokesman for a while. Averell Harriman often was a spokesman for the British input into these things, just to mention him. McCloy was a protege of Stimson, and he became the spokesperson of the oligarchy in the late 40s and kept doing that during the 50s. After that, McGeorge Bundy of the Bundy brothers became head of the Ford Foundation and the spokesperson for the U.S. ruling elite. And you can see how these guys operate. Here's Schultz and Warren Buffett choosing Schwarzenegger to be governor of California, basically saying, here's the next governor of California. And this is what Schultz in particular did this for the Bush administration. It's Schultz who chose Bush, Cheney, the Vulcans, Condoleezza, Wolfowitz, and all the rest of them. He designated them as the team that the establishment wanted to see elected. Now, it's not automatic, and it doesn't mean they always get what they want, but they quite often do. So that, I think, so what we now have is this unprecedented situation where instead of having a clear voice, we've got two different voices, both evil, but not the same. And obviously, it's better from our point of view if the Baker line prevails, even though this is not a solution to anything in the long run. Now, as we go into this tremendous effort to try to ward off these horrendous consequences, what have we learned from 2006? We've gained a lot. We've been able to attain a certain area of unity in action while keeping up a vigorous polemic in the area of theory, and that's what I would recommend. Last spring, almost a year ago, we had the Charlie Sheen affair. You know, Hollywood stars who attacked the war in Iraq are a dime a dozen. But one star who attacks on 9/11 knocks the entire media world on its ear. Gatekeepers, please take note. And of course, Alex Jones was instrumental in that. And then we had what I consider to be the political turning point of 2006, the moment when the Bush faction lost the election, is the Alex Jones conference in Los Angeles last June. And above all, the fact that this was on C-SPAN 4 times and got the biggest audience in C-SPAN history. This was the moment where the climate of opinion changed and the nightmare vision lost its vim and its effectiveness. We began to wake up from the nightmare. And again, we have Alex Jones. You can see the Professor Stephen Jones that we had here before, Colonel Bowman. You can see Professor Fetzer over there in the corner. And that blue shirt, that's me. So there we are. And the fact that this was on C-SPAN 4 times meant that opinion leaders all over the U.S. basically said, hey, wait a minute, this 9/11 story is a crock. We don't believe it. In other words, the proclivity to be terrorized and stampeded, the hysterical nightmare vision of 9/11, right? Ooh, the boogeyman begins to become laughable, right? It begins to be less effective. And of course, there had been then the presence of Jones and Fetzer on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and so forth. And it's still going on, right? The people who are hurrying to read about the 62 Republican perverts can stop off on the way and read about 9/11. Featuring Jones. And we, 30 seconds of fame for everybody. Here I am on CNN. And then we get the candidates movement, and I won't go through the whole candidates movement except to cite Bob Bowman got 44% in the 15th of Florida, and if Rahm Emanuel, our dear friend Rambozo, had given him a couple of $100,000, he would have won the seat. Now, this is the tremendous power, and we had people all over, and I'm not trying to neglect anybody. Carol Boulet and many others did tremendous service. Now, let's look at these two parliamentary cretins, shall we? These pathetic specimens. Do you think that they inflamed and electrified the U.S. electorate to vote for them? Of course not. They did everything they could to lose the election. Since the election, they've done everything they could to throw it away. Our result is that by October, we have the New York Times CBS poll saying, do you think that they're telling the truth or mostly lying? Telling the truth, 16%, hiding something, 53%, mostly lying, 28%, not sure, 3%. This is our handiwork. So it means, and this is important because it's easy to forget, the masses are with us. Who's against us? Yeah, the institutions. The institutions are against us. The media, the networks, the political parties, most of academia, and so forth. But the people have already been convinced by us to a very significant degree. What can we do with this now? We were the ones who knocked the demagogy of terror on its ear. Rove had said at the beginning of the year, we're going to win again with 9/11 in 06. It worked in 02, it worked in 04, but in 06 it didn't work. Many observers, Obama was one of them. Obama said, the 9/11 stuff has lost a lot of its bite, right? 9/11 is not what it used to be when it comes to stampeding the voters. And again, those are the turning points. The result is that the nightmare vision is largely discredited. We did this. Now, building on this success, who can stop World War III? Answer. Time magazine has appointed us the persons of the year. We are now the internet content providers of choice. 9/11 truth. We've got the whole world of the new media, YouTube, 9/11 blogger, and so on down the line. Now, this is the part where I want you to pay attention, because now I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm proposing something that I want you to do. And if you don't agree, I want you to say so I can try to convince you. Now, what's our situation? We have light forces. We're kind of the light cavalry. We're not the heavy siege train or anything like this. We're not that numerous. We don't have too much money. We're not centralized. It's all polycentric, right? It's a series of groups, of websites, and so forth. But we have the greatest, most effective political issue, 9/11 and the new 9/11. And above all, the fact that people are here means that you have moral and intellectual courage which towers above the people around you. And you do. You are the salt of the earth. You. And now the question is, can we face the task ahead of us? Our agitation is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the standard anti-war rhetoric. There's no doubt. Again, Charlie Sheen shows that. So my question is, how could these limited forces help to steer the world away from the catastrophe, from World War III? And what I want to propose is 9/11 truth squads. It's not just another tactic. It is, I think, the key to getting out of this situation. Now, let's look at what we have. 2007 offers us a special window of opportunity that you often don't have. We've got the New Hampshire primary, we've got the Iowa caucuses. The thing that made me know that I had to come here was we have the Nevada caucuses. And Nevada is just down the road, right? Las Vegas. This time, what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. But we will use it to change the political situation. Now, there's also the South Carolina primary, important. What does this mean? It's the only time that the ruling class candidates come among the hoi polloi, among the people, us. They have to come to town meetings, barber shops, workplaces, old folks' homes. You can find them on the street, Manchester, New Hampshire, candidates walking up and down the street, shaking hands with people. It is a situation that cannot be controlled. It is impossible to control it. It's also impossible to control because you have 25 candidates. So 25 candidates in 4 states, it's beyond the ability of anybody to control. We must intervene to get results. 9/11 truth squads. What are we going to do? We're going to disrupt the media food chain. We will break the controlled environment, disrupt the mass brainwashing. We will create a media feeding frenzy. We can force the controlled corporate media to work for us. It can be done. Now, how do we do it? Hey, the Socratic method. We ask questions. But of course, when we ask questions, they're loaded questions. Here's our man. Plato, and Socrates, of course, but Plato is the way we know him, tells us this is the way you operate. The gadflies, we are the gadflies of the world, but we can do something profound. Now, what are you going to ask? Senator, congressman, governor, what about the Brzezinski warning? He says they're preparing a new 9/11 to pitch us into war with Iran. Won't you condemn it? Won't you pledge to investigate it? You're going to ask about the nuclear sneak attack on Iran, the new 9/11. We want to junk the Kane-Hamilton report. We can go through why. There are many facts in the public domain that are not even findings, they're just facts. We want to reopen 9/11. And then the other dimension is your limitless creativity, your favorite issue. What is it? Building 7, the Pentagon, the stock shorting, anything that you like is grist for the mill. Now, do you see this young gentleman? He gives us an example of what you can do with almost no resources. He is a person who helped within the framework that we had created. We had created the framework. This guy, his name is Siddharth, and he is the one who got Allen defeated in Virginia simply by showing up with a camera. Right? So he's SR Siddharth, and it was Monday, August 14th, and he showed up he's at the campaign headquarters of Webb, but it's Senator Allen's macaca moment. And you saw this. It was a media frenzy. Macaca looks over at him and says, "Hey, Macaca, welcome to the real world of Virginia." He's a monstrous racist. He's a monster of racism and prejudice. The macaca moment. And the macaca moment determined the majority of the U.S. Senate. We are now in a situation of breakdown crisis where there's a kind of nervous energy, you might even say a hysteria in the population, right? Britney, it's Britney or macaca. It's Britney or the girl's gone wild or whatever it is, right? But there is an instability, a lability in the mass psychology, which you can touch with your hand. Now, the macaca moment. Our job is to create macaca moments around 9/11 truth. Here's what we do. The basic truth squad 2 people to ask questions. Look different. One well-dressed, one scruffy, whatever. Go to different corners of the room. A question, a follow-up. Another person comes with a camcorder or a cell phone. You confront them on the issues. You should not get arrested. It shouldn't be anything like this. I can't guarantee that you won't be. But that's not the idea. The idea is emphatically don't. It's nothing illegal. This is democracy. We are citizens. They want our votes. They must answer. They have a duty to answer us. You tape the result and you post it. And we'll build up moments of tremendous interest. We've done a couple, and I'll tell you in just a minute about some of these. You put them up on 9/11 Blogger, YouTube, dc911truth.org. We have our website, 911truthsquads.com. So the content provider is you. In other words, to take the tremendous theoretical elaboration that we've put together over the past 5 years plus and project that into this wide open, chaotic presidential primary situation. The Truth Squads were founded in Dover, New Hampshire, January 20th. 2 guys with almost no experience went out and confronted Senator Dodd, and they made him say that he would look into reopening the 9/11 Commission. And yeah, Senator Dodd. It was not his plan. He said, oh, I'll look into it. And they got him twice. And the whole thing was put in detail in a local newspaper, which we'll be posting. So Dodd, Richardson was asked, will you support the reopening of 9/11? And he said, yes. He said it. Unfortunately, this they didn't tape. If we had it on tape, we'd have something, right? And Jesse Jackson, this was interesting. We had a meeting at the home of a lady who's here, I think. Lynn? Is Lynn here? Yes. In Washington, before the January 27th peace demonstration, we had a meeting of the people who were going to take part. Some really smart kids from Temple University in Philadelphia showed up. And sure enough, the next day, they went out and found at the speaker's platform of that demonstration, where the 9/11 people were banned, of course, banned, Jesse Jackson. They approached. Reverend, will you support reopening 9/11? What about Building 7? What about this stuff? And Jesse Jackson, I mean, you have to see it, is an exercise in flight, right? In evasive action, right? Too hot for Jesse to handle. Doesn't want to touch it. And this is just the beginning, because there are 25 candidates. He's not even a candidate, but you see what you can do. So you want to look at the front runners. Now, obviously, in many ways, Giuliani is in a position of Giuliani. But don't forget Hillary Clinton. There's another guy, some call him Obama. Obama because of his proclivity to bomb Iran. McCain, obviously. Romney seems to be the makeover artist. He's like one of these X-Men, right? He can take on any shape. Now, Jack Blood used this term viral. I don't like viral for what we do, but I would call it nonlinear possibilities. In other words, the possibilities of exponential growth are there. Suppose this becomes a campus fad. When I saw how fast those Temple University guys went out and did this, I was amazed. They did it. It can become a mania, because what you're doing is tapping into the tremendous resentment of the average person against the ruling class. Those financiers, those corrupt politicians, right? This disgust and resentment and loathing for the entire rotten crew. And now they're going to say, guess what? You're going to Iran. Your children are going to go die in Iran for the greater glory of the neocons. And of course, as I've tried to talk about, I can't touch it now, but the party realignment. We're in the end of a 40-year cycle. The 40-year cycle of reaction and basically Republican reactionary domination, that 40-year cycle is coming to an end. Now, even with their relatively mild questions, the peace movement already threw Hillary Clinton into a crisis. Up in Berlin, New Hampshire, way up north, above the notch, as we say in New Hampshire, way up by the Canadian border, Hillary Clinton was confronted by this guy who said, You voted for the war, repudiate your vote for the war. She wouldn't do it because, of course, Rupert Murdoch told her not to, right, her principal backer. This then led to 3 or 4 op-eds in the Washington Post in a couple of days saying, hey, that aroused anti-war base is not happy with Hillary. Hillary is in trouble. This created a crisis in the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then she went out and said, oh, I got to think of something. We got to get out in 90 days. She came up with a completely new tactic over the previous weekend to try to say, look, I'm really radical. I'm really against the war. So this is the kind of thing. Now, may I suggest the political basis for the movement is the notion of MIHOP, that the events were made to happen on purpose by a rogue network inside the U.S. intelligence community, the U.S. defense establishment, and they were taking orders from various financiers. Our wonderful DC911truth.org logo says it all. Your government failed you. That was Richard Clarke, himself a mass murderer. But the real truth is your government killed you. They didn't fail you, they killed you. That's MIHOP in a nutshell. There is nothing more powerful. We've had 9/11 truth candidates. We need to have more. We need to have people thinking about declaring for Congress. If your local Democrat turns out to be a warmonger, declare for Congress right away. We will need a presidential candidate before the end of this year. Colonel Bowman is an obvious choice for presidential candidate, but he may not be available because he may want to run for Congress with the perspective of winning, which for him I think is a real perspective. But we've got to have an active discussion about a presidential candidate. Now let me also recall, MIHOP is the only alternative to the global war on terror, because if you believe in the official version, the unanswered questions, the blowback or LIHOP, the let it happen on purpose, this all leaves you with the Bush FBI picture of the world, where there really is a Muslim Arab organization of terrorist killers who want to attack. They want to come here and kill people. And this is exactly what I at least deny, that Al-Qaeda and bin Laden, these are patsies working for the CIA and MI6. So we reject the Bush FBI definition of the political reality. Al-Qaeda, in that sense, does not exist. The other question with MIHOP is, where is the next attack coming from? I've tried to show it before. It's not coming from Hezbollah, Iran, Al-Qaeda, bin Laden, the laptop, the cave, and the rest of this nonsense. It's coming from Cheney's controllers, the Cheneyacs. Is the global war on terror real? No, it's a fraud. The unanswered questions and blowback and lie, they say, oh, we all agree that there is this problem. It's the question of how do we solve it? And in reality, no, there is no global war on terror. The US and the British are using PKK Kurdish terrorists. They're using MEK Iranian terrorists. They've got the Ahvaz Liberation Front. They've got Baluchi terrorists, Chechen terrorists. The US and the British run much of world terrorism. How about Robert Gates? Now the Secretary of Defense is the founder of Al-Qaeda. Look in my book, he says, when he was deputy director of the CIA in the mid-1980s, he created, he says he didn't, but he did, an Arab Legion, an international brigade. The other one to watch out for is the new intelligence czar, McConnell, right, the replacement for Negroponte. He worked for 10 years as one of the bosses of Booz Allen Hamilton. And if you want to know what happened on 9/11, maybe you should ask Booz Allen Hamilton. More I cannot say. Now, 9/11 remains the heart of the regime. Nothing has changed. In the escalation speech on January 10th, Bush cited 9/11. The next day, the Karl Rove talking points, as recited by Limbaugh, 9/11, 3,000 dead. Cheney's interview a couple of days after that. Al-Qaeda, bin Laden. Lieberman, meet the press that Sunday. 9/11 not once but twice. The Bush State of the Union had a nightmare vision of 9/11 that went on for about 1/3 of the speech. Just last week, in the House debate, Congressman Shadegg and Hoekstra, or Hoekster as we know him, they sent a letter to House Republicans saying, dear colleagues, if you talk about Iraq and the surge, you lose. You got to talk about bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the global war on terror. So the demagogy is still based on 9/11. Now, we cannot close your eyes to the fact that Bush retains 35% support. This is when you ask, do you support Bush? Not 9/11, but Bush. If you want impeachment, that's easy, the majority of the House. But if you want to remove him from office, you've got to get to 2/3 plus X of the Senate. If you want to cut off funding and override those vetoes, you're going to need 2/3 of the Congress, both houses, to override a veto. How about the 25th Amendment? Let's declare Bush insane. Perfectly reasonable. Half of the cabinet, but then when he says, no, I'm not insane, then you need 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate. So you always come down to the fact that to do anything serious, you need 2/3 plus X. Now, it just shows that the tactics of the peace movement and the Democratic Party fail. They don't cut into the 1/3 of support that he retains. What could change that? Nothing has changed. 9/11 truth is the only conceivable way. The 1/3 who support him, sincerely believe that there's Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. They've been betrayed by Noam Chomsky and the rest of the left liberal intellectuals who should have told them that it was a lie, but haven't done it. So 1/3 of the U.S. population believes in the nightmare vision. We have to show them that we rip aside the curtain, and it's not this horrendous monster, but it's this little man with the levers behind the curtain. We rip aside the curtain, we can begin to break into Bush's 1/3 base of support. So we are the key. Once again, 9/11 truth is the only way. The only way to get impeachment, and people may deny this, you won't get impeachment until you have 9/11 crimes as one of the articles on the bill.
It should be the only article on the bill.
Well, I think we want to bring along many different groups. So let everybody have their, bring on more. Now, just a couple of other quick notes. I guess we've passed our time. The 9/11 truth movement, we have the problem in our own ranks is, do we have sectarianism or do we have a united front approach? Now, you know the debates. Are there planes or no planes? Pods or no pods? Dot or no dot? Nuclear weapons, yes or no? How about thermonuclear? The space laser beam, yes or no? There's also the question, have you lived a pure life? Have you ever done anything bad? Did you ever work for the government? There is no excuse for sectarianism. We have urgent tasks. Here's my proposal. Let's have a sphere of theoretical inquiry where the rule is diversity of opinion. Shop talk, call it that. We do not want a formal legal straitjacket on what we're allowed to say, right? Some guy sees a dot, fine. Somebody thinks there's a nuclear weapon, well, let's talk. But good political judgment and maturity is required. If you're lucky enough to get a call from CNN or Fox News, you don't take your latest half-baked intuition and put that on TV and then become wedded to that notion. You've obviously got to plan a public intervention with a sense of the needs of the movement as a whole for political purposes. Now again, I would say some forms of argumentation are not good. I'm going to get in big trouble now, given where I am. But if you say men from Mars did it or flying saucers, I don't think that's admissible. The Holy Spirit, I'm all for the Holy Spirit. I'm devoted to the Holy Spirit, but I can't say this happened through the Holy Spirit or demons or whatever else it is. This is not good. But then here's the other side of it. We had the theoretical sphere. Now we have the sphere of political cooperation. We have to do things. Look, 9/11 truth squads, take back the airwaves, candidates, conferences, propaganda. Look, candidates I like so much I put it twice. When you do this, if you have 10 people in the room, you have 10 different views. You have 10 different theoretical views. So the challenge to everybody is be mature enough to cooperate with people who have different views when it comes to having the conference, getting things done, getting the candidate, and above all, going out and intervening on Hillary Clinton and the rest of them. Thank you. in terms of the theoretical debate, I would just say this. They told me, I said, well, they said, would you come? I said, oh, I'll be glad to come. I need 3 hours. They said, well, you can't have 3 hours. So I said, what? I can't talk about the drills and Angel is next? No. This is all about action, right? Accountability. So I've tried to do that. But let me just say briefly, on 9/11, there are 15 to 20 drills. And I find that people don't discuss this. I seem to be the only one. Please do me a favor. You want to say, Tarpley is crazy. The drills don't exist. It never happened. Great, say so. Let's have a debate about that. But don't simply ignore the most important political evidence of the day, the political evidence. And this is the other one. The most important political evidence of the day is Angel is next. It is the moment where the coup d'etat faction speaks. They deliver their demands, right? You have a terrorist attack, somebody's going to deliver demands. This is essentially, dear Bush, you do what we say right now today or you are finished. And he understood right away and immediately began Al-Qaeda, 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 bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden, Afghanistan, 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 and then Iraq, 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 and all the rest of it. And I find it disappointing that there's not more interest on the part of people to try to push forward the political side of it. Now, obviously, Professor Jones is in many ways the man of the year of the movement in 2006, and this is as it should be. But at the same time, I would say, let's also give the political side of the evidence at least as much. Now, in terms of our targets, our priority targets, we have Mr. 9/11. Giuliani, the questions to Giuliani obviously are things like this. Hey, Giuliani, you were in your headquarters in Building 7 that morning, and you got warnings that the two big ones, 1 and 2, were coming down. Those office workers, those firemen, and those cops never got the warnings. How come you got them, Giuliani? How come that you know, they died because nobody told them, but you got out? Another one, Giuliani. After the fact, you cynically played the cops against the firemen to cover scoop and dump. I read about this in my book. Scoop and dump, and it's horrendous, the human remains. And you did that because you wanted to destroy the crime scene. You violated all those federal laws. The National Transportation Safety Board. You're guilty of federal felonies. You did all that. You're a lawyer. And Giuliani, you banned photographs because you said you were so concerned about the families. There's a woman called Sally Reaganhart who says she wants to swift boat Giuliani on issues of malfeasance. There's a book about Giuliani which goes into how he's a really bad executive and so forth. But unfortunately, this does not have the bite of the fact that he was destroying a crime scene. He had to melt down that steel before people found out what it was. Then, of course, we have the senator. With the senator, you're dealing with an individual who could go down on all fours and start chewing the carpet at any moment. In other words, the goal of an intervention, I think as a citizen, I want to know if my president is going to be mentally unstable or not. Because I've seen it with Bush. When Bush froze in the school, he's mentally unstable. I think this guy is too. And I think that would be one of the useful services of intervening. And then, of course, here we have a person who is a warmonger. She is a warmonger and a warmonger and a warmonger. She would like nothing better than to serve as cheerleader for the nuclear attack on Iran. She'll be out there cheering. She'll have her cheerleader dress on. The problem with her, well, the problems with her are many. She went to the AIPAC meeting in Manhattan. She's telling the primary voters that she's against the war. She goes to AIPAC and she says, when it comes to Iran, no option can be taken off the table. And at that meeting, she was in a bidding war with Edwards. Edwards was trying to outbid her for the Israeli support. And of course, she has her financier, people like Rubin. This is the head of Citibank, right? Obama. Ooh. Obama is largely a blank slate, but he has said some things where he says, I would favor a bombing attack on Iran under certain circumstances. Who runs him? Soros, the evil billionaire, has shifted his support from Hillary to Obama. Oh. Now this in some